Drugs and gang violence is a big problem in our community and in our province. People suspected or found involved in other countries of drug trafficking and money laundering and wanted by Interpol but roaming free in Canada. What would new government do to have those face justice in Canada just like they face for sex crimes against children and terrorism abroad? Harpreet will go first.
एक बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट सवाल जिहड़ा तुसीं रेज़ कीता जिहड़ा कि सारिਆਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ੁਬਾਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਹੈਗਾ इस वास्ते जिस तरह मैं अपनी इंट्रोडक्शन ਵਿੱਚ भी किया कि साडी सरकार टफ ऑन क्राइम बिल्स लैके आंदी रही है ते लियांदी रहेगी पर अफसोस 60 बिल जिहड़े पास कीते गए पार्लीमेंट ਵਿੱਚ एनडीपी ਵੱਲੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਪੋਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਬਿਲ ਸਨ ਜਿਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕਿ ਸਖਤ ਸਜ਼ਾਵਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲਸ ਨੂੰ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਸੜਕਾਂ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਘਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਸਭ ਤਰਥੱਲੀ ਮਚਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਡਰੱਗਸ ਦੀ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਗੰਭੀਰ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਸਿਰਫ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਹੀ ਨਾਲ ਲਿਆ ਕੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਸੋਲਵ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਏਗੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ 100 ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ 100 ਪੁਲਿਸ ਅਫਸਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਣਗੇ ਐਂਡ ਆਊਟ ਆਫ ਦੈਟ ਯੂ ਵਿਲ ਬੀ ਪਲੀਜ਼ਡ ਟੂ ਨੋ that 52 are already on the ground and ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਅੱਗੇ ਆਈਏ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਕਰਕੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਕੁਝ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਨੇ पूरे कैनेडा पर which crime थले जा रहे हैं पर why is it that in Surrey Newton it is increasing there are specific reasons for that and I believe we have to involve the community in decision making and come up with solutions which are pertaining to us so we'll focus on this government is the one which is saying we'll be tough on crime and that is why we are passing the bills which the other opposition parties and especially the NDP is opposing it we want rules to be toughened for the culprits and not the victims.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask Jinny to comment on the question itself directly, which is basically people suspected of fraud involved in other countries or drug trafficking and money laundering and warranted by Interpol but roaming free in Canada. What would new government do to have those face justice in Canada just like they face for sex crimes against children and terrorism abroad?
First of all, we have to make sure that we have such conventions that exist. And I believe there are some conventions that exist today, but there is a lack of resources, and that's what we've heard from border security, that's what we hear from CSIS, that's what we've heard from the RCMP. So we have to make sure that we resource our agencies so they can do the job we ask them to do. And I make a commitment that if there are gaps where we are hindered from following through with international criminals who are roaming the streets, then we will make sure that those gaps are filled. But I'm not going to stand here and say to you that everything is perfect. It's not. We all read the newspapers and we all know what's going on. But let me tell you, it's the very government that says they are tough on crime who left or stole $1.7 billion from the RCMP, and instead of letting them do their work, they took it to pay off their deficit. It's the same government that left $29 million unspent in the account to fight drugs and crime. Why? Because they wanted to pay off their deficit.
Sukh Dhaliwal, please.
Thank you. We had to have a legislation in place if there is any holes in there. And when it came to crime legislation, any piece of legislation that came through the House of Commons when I was a member of Parliament, I did not look at the political stripes. I always supported to strengthen that legislation, unlike the NDP, as Harpreet mentioned. The other thing is, where Conservatives have failed, Jinny has said right, they have failed on putting the resources into prevention. That is where we got to focus. We want to make sure that our border services, our first responders, they have the resources to deal with it. Surrey Newton, all these illegal guns that are moving into Surrey are coming from the US. They have failed. We have to restore, bring in more resources so we are able to deal with it.
Thank you. You have 30 seconds to 1 minute to respond if you wanted to or question one of the comments that they have made.
The question is the government can pass the bills, and that is what the government did. 60 anti-crime bills were passed, but unfortunately majority of them were opposed by NDP. And Jinny Sims, who comes into Surrey Newton and says that nothing is happening in the parliament when they have the time, she should have gone for those bills because that matters to all of us. But over here she says the government is not doing anything and resources have been cut. But on the other hand, what we find is just having more police will not solve the issue. We as a community have to come together. We have to come out of our silos and work together to come up with solutions.
Thank you, Jinny.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad you raised that. As a teacher, I've always said we need money in education, early prevention, rehabilitation and reintegration. And to keep saying I've opposed some of the Conservative bills, I'm proud of my record of what I have opposed in Parliament. When a government puts to get forward a bill that's the size of a phone book for Surrey, and in it they're increasing the retirement age from 65 to 67, they're cutting EI, they're cutting our environmental, they're cutting resources for kids to fight gangs.
Thank you. Sukh, please.
On one side we have Mr. Harper, who spends billions and billions of dollars building jails. On the other hand, we have NDP that does not support any legislation on crime that comes forward to strengthen it. We need to have a balance. On one side, we have to have a smart legislation to deal with hardcore criminals, but on the other hand, we have to have resources put in for prevention, for rehabilitation and education purposes.
Thank you. I'm just going to give you guys 30 seconds again just to comment on that there's going to be 100 officers, RCMP officers that were promised, regardless if they're here or not. That does not, the community doesn't think that is going to resolve the problem. What other efforts your government is able to commit or is going to commit in the near future to make Surrey safe? And we'll give you 1 minute to respond to that.
So we start with
Harpreet, please.
30 seconds? Yeah. So as far as prevention is concerned, the government is concerned about it, and just in May of this year, especially for Surrey, $3.5 million were given to the Surrey School District so that we can use that money for prevention of our youth from going into gangs. The government is committed to prevention, but along with that, we want tough rules for the culprits. Today the rules are so lax. The police can get a person arrested, but the next day they are released by the courts. So the government wants that these people who go behind the bars should feel the pinch, and that is why we are tough on crime, and we will continue to pass those bills, irrespective of the fact whether the opposition supports or not. We do not want a society where the culprits roam scot-free. You have listened so many times in Surrey Newton, 100 times offenders are roaming scot-free. So do we want that kind of society, or we want the culprits behind the bars? And we are committed to that, and we will continue with that.
One of the key things we've got to look at is the causes. We've got to look at how we address mental health. We've also got to take a look at some of our laws around drugs and the kind of resources we give the police. You know, it's very hard for me to stomach somebody who's decided to join a party that has a record that's made it easier for guns to move into Surrey and out of Surrey. Now, did you know you no longer need to get a certificate in order to move a gun if you have a license from point A to point B? Did you know that under this government, in order to save money, the regular inspections at the ports and at the border was stopped simply to save money, and now it depends on if they're suspicious? So we have a government that thinks just putting people into jail is going to solve the problem, and they're not looking at the causes, and they're making it easier for criminal activity by making it easier for gun trafficking.
Sukh Dhaliwal, please.
If we look at Mr. Harper's record over the past decade, he have cut every penny that he could to preventive measures. And now it's election time, 3 weeks into the election. Last week, CTB asked me to comment on $4 million that they are putting in here. I said, it is a drop in the bucket. We need more resources to make sure that we are able to provide the resources to community organizations that keep our children away from getting involved in the criminal activity, and the ones that they do, we have to put resources in so we are able to rehabilitate those families. And I can tell you, those efforts has been missing, and this is how we have more guns
Thank
and
you.
more crime here.
And I'm going to give just a 10 seconds to respond if there would be any. I think Harpreet had something to say on that.
Our Honourable Member Parliament should know that the guns which are being used over here are not those long guns, the 12-bore guns which are used for hunting. We are tough on crime and we are taking the measures which are required to stop people from importing and selling or using those guns. So when she says that the government is allowing, I think it's a false misinterpretation. It is only
Thank you,
those guns in the law.
Harpreet. We're going to have Jenny to go first, then next, please.
Thank you. This piece of legislation passed in Parliament in June and was a reward to the gun lobby for remaining silent on C51, and the president of the gun lobby actually made that announcement. It is easier to move guns around our country now than before.
Thank you. Sukh?
Time and time again. We cannot do this if we do not have resources for our border security forces, our first responders, making sure that those 100 police officers that has been part of the contract with Surrey, they should be here now.
Thank you, Sukh.